There have been reports circulating of 5 bodies surfaced in the Mediterranean Sea. In reports, these bodies have been described as having tied hands and feet, shackled hands and feet, or handcuffed hands and feet. Many have begun to speculate, especially if the bodies were bound in shackles or handcuffs rather than ropes, that the United States could be responsible for these 5 deaths, and many others. Over 30 bodies have been found in nearby waters since January 2025. And there have been 835 migrants reported dead or missing in nearby waters throughout 2025. In 2024, Spain saw a 15% increase in immigration, and that likely continued into 2025. These immigrants likely met their tragic demise while searching for a better life. It seems highly unlikely that these deaths are a result of American cruelty, but is it possible? Unhumans: The Secret History of Communist Revolutions and How to Crush Them is a book written in 2024 by Jack Posobiec. In this book, the author advocates for the destruction of leftist individuals and ideologies and praises fascist dictators like Augusto Pinochet. And current Vice President of the United States, J.D. Vance, endorsed the book, saying, "In the past, communists have marched through the streets, waving red flags. Today, they march through HR, college campuses, and courtrooms to wage lawfare against good, honest people." In Unhumans, Jack Posobiec and Joshua Lysek reveal their plans and show us what to do in order to fight back. Augusto Pinochet was a Chilean dictator supported and backed by the Americans from 1973 until 1990. Previously, Chileans had democratically elected a left-wing government that was, of course, overthrown by the United States government. Pinochet persecuted leftists, killing and disappearing over 6,000 people and detaining over 80,000 people in concentration camps. Pinochet and his government were famous for throwing dissenters off of planes into the ocean. If you know much about J.D. Vance and his history, this endorsement isn't surprising in the least. But is it possible that our government officials will not only endorse fascist tactics, but participate in them? If the claims are true, this wouldn't be the first time the United States has participated in this exact method of mass murder. The dirty war in Argentina is responsible for over 30,000 civilian deaths through state terrorism from 1974 to 1983. American tax dollars supported efforts in Argentina to capture over 12,000 civilians, most of whom had never been convicted of a crime, and detain them in 340 different concentration camps across Argentina. Of the 30,000 Argentinians who were killed rather than held in concentration camps, it's said prisoners were drugged, loaded onto military planes, and thrown naked and semi-conscious into the Atlantic Ocean. Between 2016 and 2019, the Argentina Declassification Project brought to light the many atrocities committed by the United States government. So, the United States government has openly admitted to killing people like mafia bosses by drowning them in the ocean, people with no criminal record. The United States government has admittedly rounded up people to put in concentration camps, not just in Argentina. The US has a long history with concentration camps. While Trump promised his supporters that criminal migrants would be deported, we know for a fact that people who are here legally and people who have not committed crimes are being deported. We know that some people are being taken to facilities notorious for human rights violations, like CCOT, or will be taken to places like Alligator Alcatraz. Regardless of whether or not the United States is guilty of currently killing people by throwing them off of planes into the ocean, they clearly aren't opposed to other fascist tendencies like mass deportations, the use of concentration camps, and state-sanctioned terrorism. It's impossible for us to currently know the truth, in the same way many Germans or Soviets didn't know the truth of what their government was doing until the war was over. Americans couldn't be sure of their government's oppressive involvement in Argentina in the 70s and 80s until the end of the 2010s. We often don't know what's happening until it's too late. In my opinion, it doesn't matter if people are truly being thrown out of planes to be killed or not. We already know for a fact that people are being thrown into concentration camps, and that's not any better. Every government that has ever utilized concentration camps or disguised them by calling them internment camps, work camps, prisons, or reservations has participated in mass extinction of their enemies. We can pretty safely assume that the United States government is currently participating in mass extinction, an ethnic cleansing, an ideological extermination, and a genocide of people living in America. Knowing our history and following the patterns is very helpful in understanding what is or what could be happening. But it's important to stay grounded in current reality and make sure that any belief we have is backed up. So why, other than a history of the United States government doing this very thing, do so many Americans believe that their government is killing the migrants they're detaining? Yes, there were the 5 bodies found and the 30 found this year, but those could be explained by other things pretty easily. What's harder to explain is the government's choice of aircraft and the patterns they fly in. According to Donald Trump, these illegal immigrants need to be removed for the safety and the financial security of Americans. So why would people be transported in one of the least effective ways, by cargo plane? I'm no aircraft expert, but according to those who are, passenger planes are much more space, fuel, and therefore cost effective than using a cargo plane for human transportation. Chartered passenger flights are typically how migrants are deported out of the United States. Beginning in 2025, a military cargo plane, the C-17, began to be used for transporting immigrants. It's been speculated that the use of cargo planes could be an intimidation tactic or a dehumanization tactic, but I'm pretty sure that the arrests and the detentions have that covered. It doesn't make sense for a cargo plane to be chosen over a passenger plane. There are more passenger planes in the United States. They hold more people, they use less fuel and less money. Passenger planes, however, cannot open their doors mid-air, and that's something cargo planes can do. If the goal isn't to transport as many people as cheaply as possible, then what is it? Surely Donald Trump and the right's hate for non-white people doesn't cover their love for money. It would really only make sense to use a cargo plane if there was a necessity or a possible necessity to dump cargo in the middle of the flight. These planes have been tracked multiple times, flying out into the middle of the ocean and turning right back around. That would certainly be a waste of gas. Many people oppose this, saying that there's no way Donald Trump has built a military willing to fulfill orders like this. But military personnel have already been fulfilling orders like this for decades from presidents that are supposedly non-fascist. This isn't a conspiracy. The government has admitted multiple times to multiple events in multiple locations to using concentration camps, overthrowing duly elected government officials, inflicting terror on civilians, murdering people specifically by throwing them out of planes, and murdering people in many other ways. Even without Donald Trump as commander-in-chief and the Heritage Foundation conducting his every move, American soldiers and government officials have been doing heinous stuff like this for years. Is it possible that these things have taken place? Yes, it's more than possible that our government would throw people out of planes into the ocean. Has this taken place? That's what we don't know. We can't know. We won't know most likely until it's completely over. All that we know is what our government tells us, which is surprisingly a lot. The fascist playbook is kind of wide open. Many people who have called and would call Nazis evil are now supporting the very things or worse things than what Nazis ever did. Americans have been primed, groomed, and propagandized for decades to accept this. Soldiers go overseas to fight for democracy. Never mind the fact that democratically elected officials are replaced with American-picked dictators. Having a large military protects America's freedom. Just don't worry about anyone else's freedom, and especially not the enemy from within. Migrants are criminals, dangerous, and less civilized than American citizens. It doesn't matter if it's Irish migrants in the early 20th century or Hispanic migrants in the 21st century. We're conditioned to accept false dichotomies and pointless disputes. Sports teams glorify violence and praise domination. If you love Taylor Swift, you've got to hate Olivia Rodrigo. I win and you lose. I'm right and you're wrong. There are two sides, and you have to pick one. Everything in our culture is turned into a binary. You must choose to love one side and hate the other, and you must know that the enemy on the other side should be destroyed at all costs. Critical thinking is the downfall of fascism. If you believe that Nazis are bad because you've been taught that Nazis are bad, then you'll believe Palestinians are bad because you've been taught that, or you'll believe that migrants are bad because you've been taught that. If you believe that Nazis are bad because they took away people's lives, freedom, and prosperity, then you will believe it's wrong to take away people's lives, freedom, and prosperity. It doesn't matter who your ideological enemy is, it is wrong to take away their life, freedom, and prosperity. You won't fall prey to the propaganda of a government who has nothing to lose but your life and nothing to gain but money. If fighting and killing your enemies is the only way to freedom, your life is being sacrificed for that. The people in power are losing nothing and gaining great wealth. You not only risk losing your physical life, but your humanity when you try to take the life of someone else. I believe this is the main reason soldiers have PTSD. Yes, there are some soldiers traumatized from watching their friends die or from being under the constant threat of death, but there are also soldiers traumatized from killing. Traumatized because they became the very monster that they were afraid of for someone else. Traumatized because in search of life, freedom, and prosperity, they took someone else's. We have to be willing to dissect every belief we've accumulated and every action we've taken and understand what conditioning and propaganda has brought us to the life that we live today. We have to be willing to look at history, learn what our government is capable of, what they've hidden, and for how long. We have to be willing to question what we've been told and our immediate responses to any information we receive. Being a caring, compassionate, and empathetic person is a lot more work than being a scared, violent, dominating person. It takes a long time and hard work. We shouldn't expect perfection from human beings. People should get grace as they strive to be better. We aren't always right. No one is. So analyze your beliefs. Understand exactly what you believe is right and wrong and why you believe it, and act on that. Not everyone in this world will change. Not everyone in this world will understand. But more people changing, more people understanding and growing in compassion and love is the ultimate goal.